Welcome to the Demeere podcast, where we talk about martial arts, self-defense, and a whole lot more. And now, your host, Demeere.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. This is episode 1 of my brand new podcast. I announced it a while ago, and I am extremely happy that it is finally live. So thank you for joining me, and in the next half hour, I will try to give you some more information of what you can expect. So first thing first, and there's a little bit of history that I need to explain here. Well, let me put it like this. About a year ago, I started with a Webcast ID, and the goal was to give you a lot of information and mainly work via my YouTube channel. Now, that worked out a little bit, but it didn't turn out as well as I wanted to. And then I stopped for a little while working on that project and basically focused on a bunch of other stuff that was important, one of them being the book, which I'll explain in a little bit. But I didn't completely forget about my idea of eventually making this into a podcast. And that's what I got to finally now with what you're listening to here. So my goal was to have a full podcast that is available on as many channels as possible. So it would be listed in many of the directories that you have for podcasts, like iTunes, Stitcher, and so on, but also try to have it simultaneously on YouTube. Now, at the time, I didn't really have good recording equipment and a good technical setup, so the quality wasn't really what I wanted it to be, which meant that on the one hand, wanted to start from scratch, but on the other hand, I didn't want to lose the content that I created in the several episodes of my webcast. So this is kind of an in-between situation that we're at right now, meaning that the podcast is now fully hosted at Libsyn, where you can download it very easily. So I did all the work to get that technical aspect covered. But on the other hand, I didn't want to start from scratch in the sense that the content that I already created would be lost then. So I'm going to explain you a little bit what the setup is right now, and then in a minute I'll tell you what's going to happen next. So first, what can you expect? Well, the tagline, the subtitle of the podcast is clear. It's the same one as on my blog, and it's been the same for years. And we talk about martial arts, self-defense, and a whole lot more. And the whole lot more part is basically trying to explain that those two topics, martial arts and self-defense, they are much deeper and much wider topics than you might expect. So a whole lot more other topics and components need to be put on the table before we can have a very meaningful discussion. And that is why I focus on those two main aspects, martial arts and self-defense, but they are obviously related to these other concepts and other topics that I will have to touch on. So that is the content of this podcast. That's what we're going to focus on. And I hope to bring you lots of information that you find useful. What can you expect in the future? Well, I'm going to offer you 2 different types of podcasts. The first one is what we'll call the regular podcast, and that will be episodes of about 30 minutes of me talking about the topics I just explained. What I also want to do is a regular Q&A, where you can give me a question beforehand, and I'll put it on the list of questions to answer, and then try to give you an answer. And also, I'll be doing some announcements. I'll be doing an announcement right after this section here, and talking about all the things that come across my mind as I go through life, experience things, train, and so on. Or if there's something in the news, I will comment on that as well. So that's a regular podcast, 30 minutes, half an hour, which I think it's a good time frame for a podcast to go. Some podcasts are a lot shorter, others are much, much longer. I think 30 to 60 minutes is a good setup practical for most people. And that brings me automatically to the second type of podcast that I will be offering, and that is the interviews. So what I'm going to do is try to interview a bunch of experts from different fields, obviously related to martial arts and self-defense, but who have perhaps a different point of view from mine, who might vehemently disagree with me, which I think is excellent, because then we can get a discussion going and everybody learns and everybody can actually get something out of it. and also try to get people who have very different past experiences, different kinds of training, who train in different arts. And my goal is to bring you guests that you find interesting and that we can all learn something from and take away, even if it's only just one thing, we can take that away towards our own training and apply it and improve our own skill sets and make sure that we also improve our own safety. So that is what I'm hoping to do with the interviews, trying to get a bunch of interesting guests going. If you have suggestions for topics for the interviews or for the regular podcast, or if you know somebody that you say, look, you absolutely have to talk to this guy, he's amazing, let me know in the comments section and I'll put him on the list. I can't guarantee anything, but I'll take it under advisement and see if I can make it happen. Now, for these interviews here, what I'm going to do is try to make it between 30 and 60 minutes per episode. And that will depend on the time that the guest has for the interview. If they don't have a lot of time, it'll be about 30 minutes. If they have some time to spare, I'll try to make it run longer and get up to 60 minutes. I think a podcast episode of about 1 hour, that's pretty much the limitations, I think, for maintaining good quality and also not boring you to death. So I want to avoid that we talk for 3 hours straight and you guys have to listen to it in multiple sittings. That wouldn't be really a very functional way to go about it. The idea of keeping it between 30 and 60 minutes, both the regular podcasts and then the interviews, is very simple. If you look at how people listen to podcasts, very often it's, for instance, when they go to work, when they commute, when they're sitting in the train, on the subway, the bus or whatever, or driving to work. And many people have about a 30-minute or a 60-minute, if you've got a lot of traffic, about a 60-minute way to work and then same way back. So for most people, having a podcast episode that takes about half an hour to an hour is actually quite a good length for you to listen it in one sitting. And my opinion is that is one of the ways you get the most out of it. If you don't have to start from scratch or because you forgot a little bit what was said when you listened to it 2 days ago, and it's a podcast taking 3 hours to finish one conversation, so you're kind of losing track of what was said. I don't think that's the most effective way to go about it for me, so I want to avoid that. So that is what's coming up. The regular podcasts, typically what I'll do is I have different topics that I'm going to approach, different points for the regular podcast. Most of it will be some news and some updates. That's usually what happens first. Then I'll have a topic that I want to talk about. Could be anything. Could be, for instance, it's almost September and we had a bunch of terrorist attacks here in Europe the last few months. So it could be that I'm talking about that. Could be a completely different topic. Could be something that I want to talk about. For instance, I have a shoulder injury right now. So how do I train without making it worse and trying to do still as much quality training as possible? Could be that, could be a bunch of things. And one of the sections that I also have, which I explained before, is the Q&A. So questions and answers. Give me your questions and I'll see if I can answer them in a worthwhile way. So that's for the regular podcast. And for the interview with guests, my idea is that it should be pretty much a conversation. So I am not a journalist, not by far, and I'm glad I'm not one. But the point is that I will obviously ask questions and I will let you guys know if there's an interesting guest and you want to ask him questions, just to send me those as well. And then I will try to, have a conversation going, ask some interesting questions, hopefully get some really good answers, but not make it a very rigid interview where I absolutely have to tick off every box on my list and grill the guests in a way that makes him uncomfortable. There's absolutely no upside for anybody when people do that kind of stuff, so that's not what I want. So that's basically it. Set up 2 types of episodes, one shorter, one longer, and obviously all the feedback that you guys can give me is welcome. So with a little bit of luck and with your help and feedback, I hope to make this a really good podcast that everybody can enjoy with many episodes to come. So that is the first part of the introduction that I wanted to mention. There's something else that I want to mention as well, and that is supporting the podcast. you can go different ways when you set up a podcast. And what many people do is they work with sponsors. I would like to avoid that. I would like to not work with sponsors for as long as I possibly can. However, if you want to support both the podcast, the work I do, my blog, which has over 600 free articles on it and so on, what you can do is support me via Patreon. Now, if you don't know Patreon, it's actually a quite interesting platform. And if you know Kickstarter, it's very similar, with the difference that it is continuous crowdfunding. So the way that it works is you commit to a monthly amount and then you get specific rewards. And there are different tiers, different levels of those rewards. They start from as low as $1 per month and then it goes up in increments. And each time you get more and more rewards when you go up in levels. I made a choice of basically looking at it as a membership site so that you have different levels that you can come in at. And then you have different rewards you get that show you mainly training information. I have a bunch of violence analysis videos, which I show you, for instance, somebody's being attacked and it's been caught on the CCTV or on somebody's cell phone. And then I analyze it, freeze frame it, go in slow motion and draw with arrows and pictures on the screen itself to point out all the relevant information. If you go to my YouTube channel, you've seen some of the samples of that as well. So that's one of the things I do. I have technique breakdowns. I have 30-minute Q&A sessions, quick Q&A sessions. I have a newsletter that I bring out every month. So and as I've been going with Patreon now since beginning of the year, so that's January in 2017, there's already a lot of content there at this point in time. So if you want to support the show and at the same time get access to a bunch of unique content that is not available elsewhere, go to my Patreon page. It's at patreon.com/Wim Demeere. So patreon.com/my name, WIMDEMERE. And take a look there. And if you feel like jumping on board, you're obviously more than welcome. I'll see you there. Every little bit helps. There is no amount that is too small. And I appreciate every single contribution. So that was a little bit of the housekeeping that I wanted to do and set you guys up with the details of what you can expect from my podcast. What's coming next? So first of all, what I will do is, I actually already did this for the most part. That is the webcast episodes that I did make on YouTube. I took the MP3 files, the audio files, extracted that from them, and actually made those in several episodes that I will put on my podcast feed here now. It's a multiple goal. It's several things. It's making sure that you immediately have a bunch of information that you can listen to right away. So I always hate it when I discover a podcast and there's only like 1 or 2 episodes and you have to wait forever for a new one to come out. So what I wanted to do is avoid that situation and make sure you guys have 3 to 4 episodes right from the get-go that give you a good idea of what you can expect from the show. And at the same time, it gives you a bunch of content right away that if you like it, you don't have to wait for an enormously long time to get more. That's one aspect. And the other side of that coin is that I did not want to lose the content that I already had on my webcast. I had an introduction in which I explained my background and the way I see things. I had a really interesting interview with my mentor and co-author Lauren Christensen. And then I had another episode which I talked a little bit about the books that I write. So I wanted to avoid having that content go to waste. So I repurposed it and put it in the following episodes. So that's what's coming next. And then in about 2 weeks, after you hear this one here, I will have the new episode on as well. Hopefully that will be an interview. I'm trying to get that fixed. If not, it will be a regular podcast, but you will see what happens then. So that was the housekeeping that I needed to do, give you guys an idea of how the podcast works, but also what you can expect. And then we can get to the next topic, and that is, drumroll please, my new book is out. After many years of waiting for many of you, The Leg Kick, your ultimate guide to using the leg kick for mixed martial arts, is now finally available. You can get it at Amazon and different retailers. It's both paperback and it's an ebook. You can get it at iTunes. I've got a bunch of retailers there for the ebooks. For the paperback, you have to go to Amazon for the moment. So it is available right now also in all the different retailers. It will be available in other ones as well for the paperback, but that takes about 6 to 8 weeks depending on a bunch of factors I cannot control. So you should see it turning up ever so slowly if you go to the bookstores. So what's all that book about? Just to give you a little bit of a background, I think it was in 2008, 2009 when I wrote a quick guide on using the leg kick, which is one of my favorite techniques. I put it online for free, and a bunch of people downloaded it, and I got some interesting feedback on it. Turns out that people wanted more. So originally, I had planned making an instructional video of that. I did all the shooting, but there was a malfunction with the camera equipment, and it turned out that the footage looked okay when you saw it on video, but then it was some completely crap when I watched it on a bigger screen. So it was unusable. And then for a variety of other reasons, which I won't go into, planning another shoot was getting very difficult. So eventually I abandoned that idea. However, I still wanted to do something. So what I did is I spent the last year finishing a full book on the leg kick for mixed martial arts. And I wrote about 30,000 more words than were in the original free document. So at this point in time, I think I can say this without lying to you guys that this is the only book in existence that goes into such amount of detail on using the leg kick in a mixed martial arts context. I try to give you as much information as possible on how the technique actually works from a mechanical standpoint, looking at how do you use your hips, what about the legs, how you work with the arms, and so on. But also focusing on when to use it, but especially when not to use it. What are the correct strategies and tactics? I gave up a bunch of case studies looking at UFC fights where the leg kick was actually critical, and much, much more. So my whole idea was to give you guys as much information as possible and make it very practical and useful, and at the same time give you enough information so that you can just take the book to class or take it to your garage if you train there, flip it open to a page and start working with it. It's actually a quite large format book so that I could manage it in such a way that with the layout you can actually have pages where there are 3, 4, 5 to even 6 pictures one next to the other, so you can follow the sequence in one go instead of having to flip forward and backwards in the book the whole time. So that's why it's a large size with that I made the book, making it a little bit more practical for you guys. So that's basically it. It's available. If you go to the resources page, which I'll mention in more detail in a minute, you can order it at all the available retailers. It's my name, wimdemeere.com/legkick. So wimdemeere.com/legkick. That is the resources page for the book. If you go there on top of the page, you will find links to all the ebook retailers and the paperback, but also a bunch of additional information. And that is something that I started doing for all my new books, which I will continue to do. The reasoning is very specific. If you have a book, you can explain things a certain way. If you have a video, you have to do it a little bit differently. So if essentially it makes it so that you want to mix them, and that would be ideal. However, if I write a book, it's impossible for me to add video in it. So what I did is I made the resources page and put some links up there. So there's a buying guide, what kind of equipment you should use. I mentioned a particular fight, a mixed martial arts fight where the leg kick was actually the key to victory. A video to that fight is available then, and much more. And I will be slowly but surely adding some more content to that resources page so that eventually, whenever you feel like doing a little bit more and you look for more information, then there's in the book and there's already plenty there. You can go to the resources page and you can find it there. So if you go there, wimdemeere.com/legkick, there are all the links and there's already a fair amount of information and I will add to it. And that's the first thing. Now, the second thing that I did, and that is also new for the books and the products I bring out, is that I made a private Facebook group. Now, it is a limited availability. There's only 100 places. And when the spots are taken, it's going to close down. There are still spots available at this point in time when I'm recording this podcast. If you want to join that Facebook group, it's very easy. Go to my Facebook page, facebook.com/Wim Demeere page, or just look up Wim Demeere Facebook and you'll find my page in Google right away. Just go there, send me a message, and I will explain how you can get in. Basically, what you'll need is to forward me the email where you get the payment receipt from the retailer where you bought the book, and then I will invite you into the private group, and there will be a bunch of information waiting for you. I have several fight analysis videos and fighter analysis videos in which I think we're about 2.5 hours now of analysis footage of different fighters and different ways of of athletes using the leg kick in the cage in UFC fights mostly, where they use it in an effective manner, in a less than effective manner, where you can see it in a very specific context with specific timing, or where I put forward different ideas like how do you use the leg kick in combination with other techniques and so on. So my goal with that was to give you sort of an online private course of how to use the information that I wrote in the book so it comes to life. So you can actually use it even better, and you can apply the knowledge a lot more than if you simply read it and then you have to discover it and work at it by training by yourself with your partners in class and so on. So it's an addition that I wanted to give to the people who buy the book immediately. So again, if you want to get in, go to my Facebook page, send me a message there, and I will explain how you can get in. And the thing that I will do is for the first 100 people who do that, you get access, and it's access for life. So I will be adding content for about 2 weeks. Every day I will be adding some content, and then I'm going to stop. And then you will always keep your access to that Facebook group, which means that it's just getting the book. And if you're quick enough, you can get all the benefits from that Facebook group. So that was a special offer, a little plug for what I have there with the new leg kick book that I wanted to do. And then we can move to the next topic, and that is what is next. People always ask me that. So the next book that I'm writing is titled Boxing for Self-Defense. I'm a huge boxing fan. This is one of my favorite childhood memories, where I would watch the late night fights on TV, where you saw the greats like Marvin Hagler was one of my favorite fighters, and Sugar Ray Leonard. I would see these guys fighting in the ring when I was a kid, and I was so impressed by boxing. And I really wanted to go a little bit further than I did with that, but unfortunately there wasn't really a boxing gym anywhere near where I was living, so I got sidetracked, let's put it that way, by martial arts, and then martial arts became my big passion. But I never stopped liking boxing, and I never stopped being a fan. So I always wanted to do something with boxing, and one of the things that triggered it is when I wrote an article about boxing for self-defense, and that is to this day one of the articles that still gets a lot of visits on my blog. So I'm busy writing the book, and it's aimed at a specific audience. So the first person that it's aimed at, it's the beginner who hasn't started his training yet, and for whatever reason he only has access to a boxing gym, boxing training, or that's what he chooses to do, and that is the person that I'm aiming it at. The second audience that I'm targeting is people who do have experience with sports boxing, but they want to use it to defend themselves, and they aren't entirely sure which part will cross over to self-defense and which will not. So that's the two-pronged approach that I'm taking, teaching the people who want to start and those who already have experience, but they want to prove their sports techniques for what they might encounter in the street. Now, I'm going to take the following approach. In the book, there will be two parts. One is its basic boxing, and the second part is what I'm going to call dirty boxing. And that is specifically for both these target audience groups. Now, the basic boxing is obviously basic boxing techniques like jab, cross, hook, uppercut, and so on. How do you use these to defend yourself? What is the difference between throwing those punches in the ring and doing it in a self-defense context? But then in the second part of the book, I'm going to focus on dirty boxing. Now, dirty boxing is a name that's been used a lot the last few years, and it is in large part the influence of mixed martial arts, where it started becoming very popular, especially with people like Randy Couture who excelled at that. And it's pretty much using all the techniques that are forbidden in boxing but are allowed in mixed martial arts. And it goes way beyond the mixed martial arts context as well. So it's using the boxing platform, the way of generating power in boxing, using that to do all the fouls and all the very illegal techniques from sports boxing. But these are often very effective for a self-defense context. So that's going to be the second part. Now, I'm working on the manuscript. I already have several thousand words, and it's going well. I had hoped to finish it by basically the end of August, but that's not going to happen, unfortunately. So my next deadline is the end of September, and then hopefully I can bring it to publication around the holiday season, this Christmas, December, first, second week, depending on how quickly everything goes. So that's the goal. Now, if you want to get information when it is released, you can follow me on social media if you like, and I'll most definitely let you know there. But you can also get on my notification list, and then you will get an email if you just sign up there. And it's very easy. You go to my site, wimdemeere.com/notification. Again, I'll put all the links on the website later on when you see the show notes. So but you can go right now if you like. Go to wimdemeere.com/notification. Sign up with your email. No spam. I only send a handful of mails per year when I have something new that goes into publication, or when I'm doing a discount or something special along those lines. And that's it. And just as I did for my leg kick book, the people who are on my notification list, they get a mail very early when the book is about to go live. And then I make sure that they can get it at the lowest price possible before the price rises for general publication. So that's it for what's coming up next. Then bring it to the final point. I want to do a quick Q&A. And this is a question that I receive, pretty much every week or so, every 2 weeks, somebody contacts me with a question along the lines of which martial art should I choose for self-defense? And the latest one came to me yesterday from Eric. Eric asked me pretty much the same question. He was from a karate background, but he wanted to be a little bit more realistic in his self-defense, which he thought wasn't really something that was covered correctly in the class that he's at right now. So when people ask me which martial art is best for self-defense, there's no good answer. There's no one answer. What I can tell you is things that should help. And first of all, the very best advice that I can give you is find the best possible teacher near you. Near you means the teacher that you can train with. Maybe you have to drive for an hour. Maybe you have to jump on a train and wait and commute for 2 hours to get to the teacher. Whatever that means to you, whatever is reasonable, whatever is possible, but find the best possible teacher you can and then train with him as much and as often as you can. Why do I put it like that? Well, let me put it this way. I don't believe in a best martial art or system for self-defense. I don't believe that exists. I think it's a matter of specifics. And the specifics mean, in the first place, the teacher. You can have an excellent teacher, but he may have a very combat sports focused mindset, so that what he teaches is very applicable in competition, but not so much for self-defense. And vice versa. You may have a teacher who has incredibly effective self-defense skills, and he teaches techniques that are really good, but he is the biggest asshole that you can be around, and he is very abusive to his students, and you really don't want to train with him because you end up crippled or worse. And I've experienced both kinds actually, so I'm not inventing anything here. That is my primary advice is, first of all, look for a good teacher, and second, then you look for an art. Obviously, if there's an art that you find that is near you, that you actually can find a correct, that it has a right schedule for you to train with, but it is an art that is very difficult for you for whatever reasons. For instance, let's imagine that you pick up Taekwondo. It wouldn't be my first choice for self-defense, but maybe that's something that works for you. But you're not at all flexible, and you have a bad back, and you can't do the jump kicks and all the flexibility training. Well, that's not going to work. Now, before anybody says anything, I am not going to say that I advocate the high kicks and the jump spinning kicks from Taekwondo for self-defense. Not at all. I'm just giving you a very technical example of why, for instance, a specific art might not work for you, even if you find a good teacher. So first of all, find a good teacher. Second, find an art that matches with what you can do. Whether it's from your body type, whether it's existing injuries, whether it is something that is psychologically really a good fit for you or not. Those are the second line of considerations that I think you should make when you're looking for a system to training. So when you look at those two, find a really good teacher who focuses on self-defense and where you can safely train in the techniques that he shows people. And then try to find at the same time, if you find a good teacher, an art that also works well for you. For instance, Japanese martial arts don't work for me. I studied them when I was younger, when I was a teenager. That's what I started with, judo and jiu-jitsu, traditional jiu-jitsu. And I found out that it's not for me. It's not my temperament. The technical way of how they do, the way they use their techniques, it's not for me. The Chinese way of training, the Indonesian way and Filipino way is much more the way that my mind and my body works. That's just me. Might be the total opposite for you, and that's perfectly fine. So find something that works for you. And then my second piece of advice would be to never stop learning. There is no end to the amount of knowledge and understanding that you can acquire when it comes to self-defense. For many reasons, because not one teacher will have the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help him God. That's not how it works. You have to find different teachers, and you have to keep on looking for new information, because not everybody has everything. And at the same time, self-defense is always something that you see in a context. You don't see it in a vacuum. You see it in a context, and context will change over time. The world doesn't stay stationary. It keeps on changing, so you have to change with it. The type of things that you might face now that are dangerous situations and the typical attacks you see now might be completely different in about 10 years' time. But if you fix your training in a certain mindset, in a certain era, well, that's not going to be the most effective way to learn. So that is something that I want you to also try to pay attention to and avoid that as much as possible. So that's it. That is an answer to the question, which martial art should I choose for self-defense? Again, find a really good teacher, find a really good school, find a teacher who is focusing on self-defense as opposed to combat sports and competition fighting. Make sure that the art you find is an art that fits you, fits your mindset, fits your body type, and so on. But most of all, never stop learning. You never stop looking for more information, for more knowledge, because there is never a point at which you can say, well, now I've mastered self-defense. Now I can handle anything that comes at me. That's simply not how it works. The moment you stop learning, it's the moment you become a potential target for somebody who actually wants to do you harm. So I advise people to be the eternal students. That is pretty much it for this first podcast. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining me. If you want to get in touch, you can find me on social media. Again, I'll put everything in the show notes, all the links to Facebook and Twitter and all those other things. If you want to support the podcast, please do so on Patreon. And if not, what you can also do to help out is just hit the like button, write a write a quick link to somebody via Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Just share it on your social media and spread the word a little bit. That is very helpful as well. So once again, thank you, and I will talk to you guys in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Demeere podcast. For more information, go to www.wimsblog.com.